Hi, and welcome back to Beans and Bezels. What does it take for a watch design to persist? If you were to dissect watch designs from a little over 100 years ago and follow those that, without much change, have remained relevant to this day, is there a common recipe to these successful designs? Most brands today play this game a bit more cautiously and look to the past for inspiration and then play within the design limits set by successful brands. Ming decided not to and appears to have looked to the future for inspiration and released the minimal and futuristic 1701 in mid 2017. Over the last 3 years, the industry has gotten to know this brand and their meticulous design evolution. And we seem to love it because Ming has seen an exponential rise in popularity among newcomers to the industry, expert collectors, and even among some very high profile celebrities. Ming's design language has evolved over the last 3 years, making both mechanical and aesthetic improvements over their predecessor timepieces. I was fortunate enough to purchase one of these debut pieces recently, the 1701 in anthracite grey. And while this review may serve no practical purpose since they aren't available anymore, let's take a look at some of the elements that have changed since then and those that have remained the same, in an attempt to understand this brand a little better. And for those interested in purchasing one of these on the pre-owned market, maybe this will serve as a guide to better understanding what you're going to get. These watches currently sell for anywhere between $1,250 and $2,500, but they originally retailed for roughly $950 US. Let's check it out. The case measures 38 millimeters in diameter, an interesting 42 millimeters from lug to lug, and roughly 9.5 millimeters in height. The case is made entirely of grade 5 titanium. I love titanium as a watch case material because of how lightweight it is, and I also prefer the grayish color over stainless steel. Grade 5 is a good option since it isn't as prone to scratches as grade 1 and 2. Grade 5 titanium is a softer material than stainless steel though, so I would like to see some kind of hardening like the DLC and ceramic based coatings that a few brands are using these days. These lugs have now become synonymous with Ming design and are actually very well executed. They flare outward but also curve down towards the wrist. The lug holes are located below the mid-case section, and the watch sits well balanced on the wrist even with its curved case back. The case has horizontally brushed mid-case sides and a polished bezel and top lug surfaces. The quality of the case is excellent, and even though this watch is pre-owned, I can still appreciate the even brushing and mirror-like polishing. A good watch design is one that is pleasing to look at but also to physically interact with, and for me this mostly comes down to the crown operating experience, especially on a manually wound watch. Here, there's a very well-machined titanium crown at the 3 o'clock position that has deep ridges and is made to resemble a mechanical gear. The grip is fantastic and there's no crown or stem wobble. There's a triple gasket crown system that gives you a nice tactile snap when you pull the crown out and push it back in, reassuring you by means of sound and touch, brilliantly executed. Flipping it over, you have a solid radially brushed case back that is attached to the rest of the case by means of 6 screws. This watch is rated for up to 100 meters of water resistance, which is more than I would have expected. Ming's founder Ming Tian is a professional photographer and has years of experience behind the lens. I believe this included watch photography as well. It should therefore come as no surprise that his watches are designed to photograph well. This dial manages to combine so many different and unique appearances, constantly changing based on lighting and perspective. This isn't limited to photographs though and can be easily observed and appreciated in person. But having looked at dozens of watches from behind the lens, I will say that some watches just photograph better than others, and this is one of the good ones. This is the anthracite grey option, as a combination of grey, black and white on the dial. The outer base has finely engraved concentric rings. This is almost invisible to the naked eye, and the result is a wonderful metallic grey glow. This is painstaking to achieve without blemishes and debris, and Ming seems to have nailed it. You then have a floating ring of white hour indices above it. These aren't floating because Ming isn't a magician. Instead, there is a thin sapphire crystal that rests above the concentric rings, onto which the numerals are printed and loomed. The quality of printing is good, and as you would expect from a $1,000 watch. As with any good piece of design, the design must identify itself and shouldn't need a garish logo plastered across it to tell you who made it. The only element of branding on this watch, apart from the unique design itself, is the small inconspicuous logo above the 6 o'clock index. Moving inward from the raised sapphire plate and indices, you have a beautifully etched center section that uses a combination of glossy black and etched grey elements to put on a magnificent light show. I don't think I've correctly figured out how this is executed and on what material, but I can correctly state that this looks incredible both in person and under a lens. The difference in height between the two elements is very subtle, and under a lot of lighting styles, this looks like a plain black dial. I'm a fan and I think the quality of finishing is impeccable. The last element is the handset. There is no seconds hand on this watch, and you have a pair of simple all-white hands that are painted and loomed. I think the dimensions are excellent, and the finishing isn't bad either. I'm glad that the handset design and finishing was abandoned on the 1706 though, and I prefer the updated polished metal hands that were more generously and more evenly filled with lume. The hands on the 1701 have a snow-like texture with coarse white lume pigment applied on it. From far away this looks alright, but up close the finishing leaves some room for improvement. I'm not a huge fan of the open center stack cover either, but now I'm just being an ass, as this watch did in fact retail for $950. The lume on this watch is disappointing, and in going for this futuristic aesthetic, it would have been hard to not lume this watch. In their defense, they have drastically improved their lume game on subsequent models with brighter numerals and an improved handset. But the reality is that the lume on this watch disappears faster than the Ming 1801 on release day. I think this comes down to just an insufficient amount of lume being applied on both the hands and the indices, and you can observe this in the grainy, uneven lume across both elements. Lume junkies will not be pleased, but who needs lume anyway? You have a Ming now. Just to humor myself, I compared this watch against two of the watches in my collection, the dressier, Bauhaus-inspired fine watches Berlin Teufelsberg. Even though the lume on the Teufelsberg isn't the greatest, it seemed to outlast the Ming. And the next obviously unfair contender is my 6-year-old Tudor Black Bay Blue. The lume on these Tudors isn't the greatest, but still very good, and the Ming couldn't keep up, obviously. This watch uses a Sellita SW210-1, and I believe it's the premium top-grade version, because Ming says it's been regulated in 5 positions and put through 250 hours of testing. The lack of a seconds hand made it difficult for me to log daily accuracy rates, and I don't own a time grapher yet. But as mentioned earlier, this movement and the crown operate very nicely, and I have absolutely no problems with it being a manually wound watch instead of an automatic. I typically wear sports watches that have lug-to-lug widths of around 47 to 48 millimeters, so I was expecting the 42 millimeter lug-to-lug width to wear a bit small. Surprisingly, it doesn't feel small at all. I suspect the 38 millimeter diameter has a lot to do with that, and it actually wears great on my 6¼ inch wrist. The 9.5 millimeter height sits very low on the wrist, almost like a dress watch. Everything really comes together nicely, and I'm a fan. The titanium case makes it wear light, coming in at around 50 grams on the leather strap. Speaking of straps, this watch was sold with 3 of Ming's leather straps. They're alright, and not really worth mentioning. Or let's just say I'm glad that they now use Jean Rousseau for all their strap-related needs. So to wrap things up, if I were to review this watch back in 2017, I think I would have been thoroughly impressed by the design and manufacturing. For $950, this would have been a pricey micro-brand watch at the time, but one deserving of that price tag based on design and build alone. But we're not in 2017 anymore, and my thoughts remain the same. This is a great watch, and I have no regrets paying over retail for this. This watch is refreshing, even 3 years later. I'm willing to overlook the poor lume because of how much this design appeals to me, and because I believe that this brand and their avant-garde design language is here to stay. If you feel the same way, and if you come across one of these pre-owned, it's definitely worth considering. It is and will continue to be the first Ming. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to read the full length review in the link below.